mildly. The result was instead a 30-year cat-and-mouse game of legislation to prevent gin consumption, followed by the rapid invention of ways to defeat those laws. Parliament outlawed flavored spirits, so distillers stopped adding juniper berries to the liquor. Selling gin was made illegal. Women sold from bottles hidden beneath their skirts, and some entrepreneurial types created the Puss and Mew, a cabinet set on the streets where a customer could approach and, if they knew the password, hand their money to the vendor hidden inside and receive a dram of gin in return. What made the craze subside wasn't any set of laws. Gin consumption was treated as the problem to be solved, when in fact it was a reaction to the real problem: dramatic social change and the inability of older civic models to adapt. What helped the gin craze subside was the restructuring of society around the new urban realities created by London's incredible social density, a restructuring that turned London into what we'd recognize as a modern city, one of the first. Many of the institutions we mean when we talk about the industrialized world actually arose in response to the social climate created by industrialization, rather than to industrialization itself. Mutual aid societies provided shared management of risk outside the traditional ties of kin and church. The spread of coffee houses and later restaurants was spurred by concentrated populations. Political parties began to recruit to the urban poor and to field candidates more responsive to them. These changes came about only when civic density stopped being treated as a crisis and started being treated as a simple fact, even an opportunity. Gin consumption, driven upward in part by people anesthetizing themselves against the horrors of city life, started falling, in part because the new social structures mitigated these horrors. The increase in both population and aggregate wealth made it possible to invent new kinds of institutions. Instead of madding crowds, the architects of the new society saw a civic surplus, created as a side effect of industrialization. And what of us? What of our historical generation? That section of the global population we still sometimes refer to as the industrialized world has actually been transitioning to a post-industrial form for some time. The post-war trends of emptying rural populations, urban growth, and increased suburban density, accompanied by rising educational attainment across almost all demographic groups, have marked a huge increase in the number of people paid to think or talk, rather than to produce or transport objects. During this transition, what has been our gin, the critical lubricant that eased our transition from one kind of society to another? The sitcom. Watching sitcoms and soap operas, costume dramas, and the host of other amusements offered by TV has absorbed the lion's share of the free time available to the citizens of the developed world. Since the Second World War, increases in GDP, educational attainment, and lifespan have forced the industrialized world to grapple with something we'd never had to deal with on a national scale: free time. The amount of unstructured time cumulatively available to the educated population ballooned, both because the educated population itself ballooned and because that population was living longer while working less. Segments of the population experienced an upsurge of education and free time before the 1940s, but they tended to be in urban enclaves, and the Great Depression reversed many of the existing trends for both schooling and time off from work. This change was accompanied by a weakening of traditional uses of that free time as a result of suburbanization, moving out of cities and living far from neighbors, and of periodic relocation as people moved for jobs. The cumulative free time in the post-war United States began to add up to billions of collective hours per year, even as picnics and bowling leagues faded into the past. So what did we do with all that time? Mostly, we watched TV. We watched I Love Lucy. We watched Gilligan's Island. We watched Malcolm in the Middle. We watched Desperate Housewives. We had so much free time to burn, and so few other appealing ways to burn it, that every citizen in the developed world